Welcome, brethren and sistren. This is See You Next Time. Yeah, we're back in the saddle and chatting atheism. I don't want to make a habit of responding to AI videos, but this one really got on my wick, so we're going to hash it out. Buckle up for some Class A stupidity. You have been warned.
What if the very questions that haunt the human soul were actually clues? What if the longing in your heart, the logic in your mind,
the sweat upon your balls,
and the laws of nature themselves were all whispering the same truth? God exists, and he is closer than you think. In this video, we're going to walk through 12 of the most powerful arguments for the existence of God, arguments that have stood for centuries, weathered every skeptical challenge, and remain, despite countless attempts, unrefuted at their core.
Spoiler alert, no, they haven't.
These aren't just religious slogans or emotional appeals. You'll hear from minds like Aquinas, Pascal, Plantinga, C.S. Lewis, and William Lane Craig.
You know what, I'll give our AI friend the rest of them, but William Lane Craig? Behave.
Giants who've shaped the very foundations of how we think about truth, morality, and existence. But this isn't just for philosophers in ivory towers. This is for you. Because if these arguments are true, and I believe they are, they don't just prove that God exists. They prove that he sees you, knows you, and has been reaching out to you all along.
The hand that reaches from the grave to grip your throat is the strong hand you want on the wheel.
So let's dive in. Number 1, the Kalam cosmological argument. Everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Yeah, okay.
The universe began to exist.
Less okay with that one.
Therefore, the universe has a cause.
So firstly, we don't know that the universe began to exist. Sure, we have the Big Bang, and it appears that this kicked off this instantiation of the universe. However, we don't know what happened before the Big Bang. And if time and space emerged from the Big Bang, we don't know if before even makes any sense.
This is not wishful thinking or theological bias. This is logic, pure, unbending, and deeply persuasive.
I'm afraid you don't get to just call something deeply persuasive. You've got to do the persuading.
Think of it. Nothing comes from nothing. If there was ever a time when absolutely nothing existed, no matter, no space, no time, then nothing could ever exist now.
Oh, so you've got an example of nothing. That's a big deal, because even a perfect vacuum has stuff, according to quantum physics. I'm not going to pretend I understand it all.
I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics.
But virtual particles popping in and out of existence, knock around everywhere, even in a vacuum. Nuts, right?
Yet, here we are, breathing, thinking, questioning. Modern science affirms what ancient reasoning already suspected. The universe had a beginning. The Big Bang was not just a bang, it was a beginning.
Well, that's great and everything, except it's sort of bollocks, because science doesn't affirm that. As I alluded to earlier, we don't know everything about the Big Bang, but we do know it doesn't necessarily imply the beginning of the universe. The singularity represents a breakdown in our understanding of reality.
And whatever begins to exist must have a cause beyond itself. But not just any cause. The cause must be spaceless, because it created space. Timeless, because it created time. Immaterial, because it exists outside of matter.
So making a bunch of assertions about no space and no time has no meaning.
And personal, because only a personal being can choose to create. That's not a description of a force. That's a description of God.
Holy nugget. Okay, say I grant you spaceless, timeless, immaterial, and you then decide to call that particular bunch of assertions with no evidence God. How the do you get to personal? You might as well say the universe was made by spangly supernatural fairies, or a big blue dude shat it out. Or, slightly more seriously, you could decide the universe is eternal, bypassing all this begins to exist business. Whatever path you choose, this does not get you further than something indefinable started the universe, and it certainly doesn't get you to any particular deity. Getting to Allah or Yahweh or whatever would require another assertion just wanged on the top.
And despite every attempt, whether through multiverse theories or infinite regress, no atheist has offered a convincing explanation that bypasses this truth without sacrificing reason itself.
Ah, yes, the classic argument from...
la 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 la, I'm not listening!
This argument doesn't just whisper God's existence, it shouts it through the corridors of cosmology and logic. Number 2, the moral argument. If God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Objective moral values do exist. Therefore, God exists.
Okay, so formal logic isn't my game, but it appears that the argument is valid. So we then go on to look at the soundness, and we run into a stumbling block on the premise that objective morals exist. Because do they? Care to offer any evidence of that? No? Yeah, thought not.
Let's put it simply. If there is no God, then there is no ultimate standard of right and wrong. Morality becomes just a matter of opinion, fluid, shifting, and bound to change with culture or consensus. But we don't live like that, do we?
Yes. Yes, we do.
When we see injustice, whether it's a child trafficked, a genocide unfolding, or someone betrayed by a friend, we don't say, well, that's just your cultural preference. We say, that's wrong. Period.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. AI man. I hate to break this to you, but the trafficking of children, genocide and betrayal are all things the God of the Bible is well into. Lot offers his daughters to be gang-banged by sodomites, the same daughters who later get him so hammered he doesn't realise he gets them both pregnant, by the way. Genocide is basically God's party trick. He loves it and does it all the fucking time. And betrayal, Job takes a proper battering just because Yahweh wants to show off to Satan, and Jephthah gets tricked into killing his daughter by the all-knowing God. The fact is that morals are absolutely not cast in stone and universally unchanging. The slightest bit of examination completely undermines that idea.
And not just personally wrong, universally wrong. That's because we know deep down that some things are not just unpleasant, but evil.
But the fact that morality has shifted over time shits all over this argument. It wasn't so long ago that you could pop into town and buy people, something the Bible was used to justify as it happens. Slavery in the Bible is rampant and God specifically endorses it. These days, however, slavery is generally frowned upon, unless you're in the prison system of the USA or China or Russia or the like. We also tend to let witches live these days, something the Bible is again not in favour of. And we don't tend to set wild animals on children when they take the piss out of someone for being bald.
And some things, like sacrificial love, courage, and justice, are truly good, regardless of time, place, or opinion. But here's the problem for atheism. If we're just atoms bouncing around in a purposeless universe, how do we get aught from is? You can't derive binding moral duties from biological impulses or evolutionary survival.
I mean, there's a field of study for this. It's called evolutionary psychology.
Even when atheists cry out against evil, wars, racism, oppression, they are borrowing from a moral framework they can't build on their own. They are using the language of justice, but they've removed the lawgiver. C.S. Lewis once said, "A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line." The moral argument reminds us of that straight line, etched not in sand, but in eternity. And that line points, unflinchingly, to the character of God.
You know, if you draw a chalk line on the ground and hold a chicken's head to it, it gets hypnotized by that line. Just saying.
Number 3. The argument from contingency. Everything that exists contingently needs an explanation. The universe exists contingently. Therefore, there must be a necessary being, God, that explains it.
Wow, that's such a powerful argument. I assume our artificial friend is going to go on and give some evidence for the universe being contingent and the need for a being for it to be contingent on. No? Oh, you do surprise me.
Look around. Everything you see, every person, planet, pine tree, and particle, could have failed to exist. And if something could have not existed, we naturally ask, why does it exist at all? The universe is full of contingent things, dependent, fragile, temporary. It didn't have to be here, and it certainly didn't have to be this finely tuned, this orderly, or this life-permitting. So where did it come from? To say it just is not an answer.
I mean, it is an answer, just not a very satisfying one.
It's a refusal to ask the most honest question. Why is there something rather than nothing? You cannot stack an infinite number of contingent causes on top of each other and pretend that explains anything. Like a row of falling dominoes, there must be something outside the chain that started the fall, a necessary being that is not dependent on anything else for its existence. This being must exist by its very nature, uncaused, independent, eternal, and only God fits that description, and only
the universe
fits that description, and only
the flying spaghetti monster
fits that description, and only
the camembert of eternal love
fits that description. Atheists sometimes respond by asking, then who made God? But that's the point. God is not contingent. He is the one who explains all else, but is himself in need of no explanation.
Well, isn't that convenient? This is essentially just a rehash of the Kalam argument from earlier, but figuring out we don't know how things started and then just shoving
God Big Bang
into it is not how anything works.
As G.K. Chesterton once said, it is absurd for the evolutionist to complain that it is unthinkable for an admittedly unthinkable God to make everything out of nothing, and then pretend that it is more thinkable that nothing should turn itself into everything. This isn't about blind faith. It's about the only reasonable conclusion. The existence of anything points us back to the one who exists necessarily, the one we call God.
Well, if my boy GK said it, then I'm in. Pass me another bowl of that word salad.
Number 4. The teleological argument, also known as the argument from design. The fine-tuning of the universe and the complexity of life point unmistakably to intelligent design. When you look at a painting, you assume a painter. When you hear a symphony, you assume a composer. So why is it, when we observe a universe more intricate than any machine, more finely tuned than any instrument, some insist it all just happened?
Oh, for fuck's sake. Look, we know that paintings are painted by painters because we've seen painters painting paintings. We know that music is made by musicians because we've seen musicians making music. We don't know that universes are universed by universes because we've only got one universe that's universed, and we've never ever seen a universer.
The more we discover about the cosmos, the more it resembles a code, not chaos. The constants of physics, gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear force, are set at precisely the values necessary for life to exist. If any of them were altered by even the slightest fraction, we would not be here to ponder them. This is not randomness. This is refinement. This is design on a cosmic scale.
Whilst it's true that various physical constants have to be just so for our survival, that's not to say there couldn't be other combinations of different values that would still be stable.
And then we come to life itself. Inside every cell is a code more complex than any written language, DNA.
More complex than any written language. It's only got 4 letters. It's just judicious and efficient use of information. Almost as if, over time, the things that fit the environment best survived.
4 chemical letters, spelling out the instructions to build and maintain every living organism. Not just patterns, but information. And information, wherever we find it, whether in books, blueprints, or binary, always comes from a mind.
I can think of some that don't come from a mind. DNA for starters, but chemical reactions, the incredibly beautiful and intricate structures of crystals, the girl in my head. If you define information as stuff that humans can interpret and act on, then of course most of that is going to come from a mind. The action of DNA is applied organic chemistry, following rules directly determined by the structure, shape, and electronic configuration of molecules. Just because we've developed the science far enough for us to get some kind of handle on how it works, does not mean that God's been writing to us in DNA code. He only writes that to me, because I'm special.
Atheists are increasingly cornered by this. Many now appeal to the idea of a multiverse, an unprovable realm of infinite universes, just to say, well, maybe we got lucky. But that's not science. That's speculation. That's not reason. That's retreat. As John Lennox often says, chance is not a cause.
The multiverse concept is, I agree, kind of intellectually lazy, although not as intellectually lazy as God done it. We know that the multiverse is at least theoretically possible, according to people who know a great deal more physics than I do. And we know that life is possible, because, there's life. So with the multiverse, we essentially get an infinite amount of opportunities for universes to arise that can support life. So even if it's statistically incredibly unlikely, it's going to happen a whole bunch of times. If you're a theist and find this argument incredibly unsatisfying and frustrating...
Question. How's that medicine taste? Your own flavored?
Number 5. The argument from beauty and aesthetics. Objective beauty, awe, and transcendence. There are moments that stop us in our tracks. A symphony that moves us to tears. A mountain range glowing at sunset. A newborn's first cry. And every time our hearts are stirred by it, we are reminded. This world is not just mechanics and matter. It is meaning. It is music. And behind it all is God.
What? I mean, it's all very lovely and poetic, but this is not an argument. Things are pretty, therefore God exists. Unadulterated bollocks.
Number 6. The ontological argument. God is a being than which none greater can be conceived. If God possibly exists, then God exists necessarily. This one stretches the mind.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
Imagine the greatest possible being. Not just slightly more powerful than you or me, but infinitely great, perfect in power, in knowledge, in goodness, in existence. The kind of being who cannot be improved upon. Now, here's the key. If that being exists only in the mind, only as a concept, then something greater could be imagined. That same being, but also existing in reality. Therefore, if the greatest possible being can exist, he must exist. Not just possibly, but necessarily.
Right, so hang on, just to clarify, this argument is, If you can imagine an all-powerful being, that's great. But if it actually exists, then it would be greater. Therefore it must exist. What kind of nonsensical bollocks is this? You might as well say, I want a
10-foot cock and a few hundred virgins.
Therefore I do. And while that's true for me, it's not true for everybody.
This isn't a logical trick.
I think we can safely say it's not logical.
It's a profound insight into the nature of necessary existence, and it has held the attention of some of the greatest thinkers in history, from Anselm in the 11th century to Alvin Plantinga today. Even atheist philosophers like Bertrand Russell admitted that the ontological argument is hard to shake once you truly understand it.
Yeah, he actually said that you can't just define something into existence.
It's not the kind of argument that grabs you by the shoulders. It's more like a quiet voice in a cathedral, whispering.
It's like the priest telling the altar boy to stay behind. Nothing good is ever going to come of that.
Number 7. The argument from consciousness. Consciousness, free will, and rationality cannot be explained by matter alone.
Citation needed.
But if their thoughts, i.e. of materialism and astronomy, are mere accidental byproducts, why should we believe them to be true? Consciousness is not a glitch in the system. It is a signal, flashing red against a purely materialist worldview. You know that you are more than a brain. You have a mind. You make choices. You know what is true and what is false. Those things are not made of matter. They are made of meaning, and meaning points to mind, the divine mind behind it all.
Again, this is just another argument from personal incredulity. Consciousness is currently unexplained, other than to say it appears to be an emergent property of the brain. Just saying consciousness proves there is a God doesn't make it so. Fuck me, these are infuriating.
Number 8. The argument from desire. We have a longing nothing in this world can satisfy. Therefore, we were made for another world.
Wow, that's a good point. Let me think for a bit. Oh, wait, my mistake. That's absolute bullshit.
There's a hunger inside every human soul, a kind of homesickness that nothing in this world fully resolves. We chase beauty, pleasure, success, even love. And yet, just when we think we've grasped it, our hearts still whisper, there must be more. Where did that longing come from? We don't hunger for food unless food exists. We don't thirst for water unless water exists. So why do we ache for eternity, justice, meaning, and a love that never ends? Evolution doesn't need those desires. Natural selection doesn't reward people for longing for God or ultimate truth. And yet, there it is, in every soul, a longing that nothing in time or space quite satisfies.
Okay, so we've really crossed the border here into full-on nonsense. We've got a god hole that needs to be filled to the brim with big, sweaty god meat. Oh, and we're designed to live in a different world. No, I've not been taking my meds. Why do you ask?
C.S. Lewis, who gave this argument its modern voice, said it this way. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world.
There's a lot of quoting C.S. Lewis here as well. I'm not sure why our AI friend thinks that a fervent Christian who effectively rewrote the story of Christ to involve a lion should be particularly persuasive and hard-hitting.
This isn't escapism, it's realism. Our longing is not a glitch, it's a guide, a signpost pointing us home, and that home is found in God, the one who planted eternity in our hearts and calls us back to himself. Atheism can describe desire, but only Christianity explains it and satisfies it.
If you replace explains and satisfies with wildly asserts, I'm with you.
Number 9. The resurrection of Jesus. The claim that Jesus of Nazareth rose bodily from the dead is not just central to Christianity. It's the linchpin of the entire faith. And unlike vague spiritual experiences or mystical claims, this event is rooted in historical evidence, grounded in time, place, and eyewitness testimony. Here are the 3 historical facts that are accepted by the majority of critical scholars today, including many who are not Christians.
What's the betting? We have a series of assertions coming up.
Fact 1. The tomb was found empty by a group of Jesus' followers 3 days after his crucifixion. Even hostile sources concede this. If the body were still in the tomb, Christianity could have been crushed instantly by a simple counterclaim. Here's the corpse. But the body was never produced. Why? Because the tomb was and remains empty.
No, we have a story written about an empty tomb.
Fact 2. Multiple independent eyewitnesses reported appearances of Jesus alive after his death. We have early, creedal statements, like the one preserved in 1 Corinthians 15, dated by scholars to within 3 to 5 years of the crucifixion, claiming that Jesus appeared to Peter, the 12, James, more than 500 people at once, and even to Paul, who was a persecutor of the church. These are not later embellishments. They're embedded in the earliest Christian testimony.
No, we have a bunch of stories in which various unnamed people were claimed to be eyewitnesses, with 1 Corinthians written at best about 20-25 years after the crucifixion.
Fact 3. The explosive rise of the early church, especially among Jewish monotheists, demands explanation. First-century Jews believed resurrection happened only at the end of time, never in the middle of history, and certainly not to someone who claimed to be divine. So what convinced thousands of them almost overnight to begin worshiping a crucified man as the risen Son of God? It wasn't mythology. That takes generations to develop. It wasn't hallucination. Groups don't hallucinate the same thing. It wasn't legend. The resurrection claims were circulating within years, not centuries, and it wasn't deception. The apostles gained nothing by preaching Christ risen, only imprisonment, beatings, and in many cases, execution. People don't die for what they know is a lie.
Okay, so Christianity did expand over the next few hundred years with a bunch of people promoting it and claiming that if you join the club, you'll get to spend eternity in paradise.
So what's the best explanation of these three facts? The empty tomb, the post-mortem appearances, and the birth of the church. There's only one that fits the evidence without forcing it. Jesus actually rose from the dead. And if that's true, then God is not silent. He has spoken, and he has vindicated his Son before the eyes of history.
The explanation that best fits the facts is that people wrote stories. They didn't have Netflix back then. What else are they gonna do?
As philosopher Richard Swinburne put it, if God exists, and if God has revealed himself in Christ, then the resurrection is the kind of miracle he would perform to validate that revelation. This is not blind faith. This is reasonable trust in the best explanation of real historical data. The resurrection doesn't ask us to shut off our minds. It invites us to open our eyes.
Our narrator leaves out the fact that the canonical Gospels all contradict each other when it comes to who and how many people visit the tomb, whether angels were there, what they reported and to whom they report it, the reaction to those reports, whether or not there were 500 plus eyewitnesses, and whether or not a whole load of holy people got right up out of their graves and zombied about town with everyone watching. Odd that.
Number 10. The argument from miracles. Miracles are consistently reported across cultures and times, especially in connection with the Christian faith. Let's be honest. In a scientific age, the idea of miracles often gets dismissed out of hand. Not because they've been disproven, but because some people have decided, in advance, that they simply can't happen.
Oh, well hang on, you've got me there. Miracles have been reported. Oh, no evidence, you say? None at all? No verified miracles ever? Okay.
Number 11. The argument from evil. Flipped. This is the objection that's echoed through centuries. If God exists, why is there so much evil in the world? It's a heartfelt question. But when we look closer, it becomes not an argument against God, but a compelling argument for him.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Here's why. If God does not exist, then evil is just a matter of opinion. If evil truly exists in any objective sense, then good must also exist. And if good and evil are real, there must be a standard beyond human minds. Therefore, God must exist as the source of that moral standard. Think about it. If we're just highly evolved animals, then what you call evil is just a byproduct of natural selection. Murder, oppression, betrayal.
So this is just a rehashing of the so-called moral argument from earlier. We start with the assertion that evil exists as an absolute, as an actual thing rather than something that evolved as part of human psychology. We then couple that with the assertion that the counter, good, also exists in the same capacity, and then add the assertion that God must exist to provide an objective arbiter of good and evil.
That's not wrong.
It is.
It's just what the strong do to the weak in a godless world. But we don't live like that. We cry out against injustice. We rage against genocide. We grieve over abuse. Why? Because deep down we know this is not how it's supposed to be. Atheists borrow the vocabulary of moral outrage while sawing off the branch it sits on. You cannot call something truly evil unless there is a higher law being broken.
If this were true, it just means God's a cunt for giving kids cancer, HIV and fetal alcohol syndrome, and then tries to claw back his reputation by occasionally curing them.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
As C.S. Lewis, himself once an atheist, wrote, "My argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line."
Yes, Clive, that'll be down to evolutionary psychology.
The presence of evil in the world is not evidence against God. It's evidence that we live in a broken reflection of something better, something good, something pure, something we were made for. evil is real. And because evil is real, God must be real, as the only possible standard by which we judge anything as wrong in the first place. This argument doesn't ignore the pain of the world. It explains why that pain hurts, because it violates a moral law written into reality. And that law? It leads us, not away from God, but directly to his feet.
Right, so if evil exists, then God must exist. I don't believe that anyone could take this argument seriously.
Number 12, the presuppositional argument. Without God, you can't justify logic, morality, or even science itself. Atheism must borrow from the Christian worldview just to argue against it. Here's the uncomfortable truth for atheism. In order to deny God, you have to sit in his lap to do it.
Would you like me to lap dance for you?
You can't make arguments without logic. You can't trust logic without immaterial, universal laws of thought. And you can't ground universal, unchanging, immaterial laws in a purely material, ever-changing universe.
And here we come to the final argument, known as presuppositional apologetics. This is essentially a combination of all the others, dressed up with a big dollop of extra assertions and total drivel.
So where do these laws of logic come from? They're not made of matter. You can't weigh them, test them, or grow them in a lab. They're not cultural. They hold across all cultures. They're not subjective. We all know contradictions are false, no matter how we feel.
In fairness, every worldview does require some presupposition. For example, we work on the basis that we can experience physical reality and learn things about it using our sense perception, and we can apply the laws of logic. But this argument begs the question by taking it as a presupposed fact that God exists and is required in order to be able to do any of that. Once again, with zero evidence or reason, God is slapped in there to do some heavy lifting. It's a very lazy and disingenuous argument, and with very few exceptions, the people who use it are insufferable pricks.
And here's the kicker. Atheism, based on materialism, has no foundation for any of this. If your brain is just a meat computer, shaped by unguided evolution, why should you trust any of your reasoning, including your belief that God doesn't exist?
The crux of it all comes to this. God exists because I say so, and you can't disagree with me because you have to believe in God to use any sort of logical rationality. God told me so, so it must be true. Check, mate, atheist. I jest, but that really is the core of the argument.
How do you call anything good or evil without an absolute moral standard? Why assume the universe is orderly and intelligible unless it was designed to be? You cannot account for the preconditions of intelligibility without appealing to the God who designed both the universe and your mind.
Bollocks.
Every time the atheist uses logic, appeals to morality, or relies on science to disprove God, he's standing on God's own ground.
Bollocks.
Christianity doesn't just explain some things, it explains everything.
Bollocks.
And that's why the presuppositional argument doesn't just poke holes in unbelief. It exposes the whole system as intellectually bankrupt without God.
Bollocks.
It's incredibly tedious to engage with this argument, partly because it's so nonsensical and laden with unbacked assertions, and partly because the people who tend to wield it are such insufferable pricks. If you haven't heard of Darth Dawkins, aka Dunkin Atheist, aka Evolution False, aka Gary Milne, I sincerely apologise for what I'm about to subject you to. He's a toxic boomer pensioner who's racist, homophobic, and just an all-round twat, and the worst of a very bad bunch.
Since you don't believe in God, what is the ultimacy of reality that makes God unnecessary, that provides you with the ability to think and to reason?
So can you give me that first quality?
That quality is that which is absolute and unconditionally non-dependent.
Yeah, but now you're over-talking me.
Can I finish my question? I'm trying to answer your question. You're going to cut me off rudely again?
Oh.
Is this the style of your broadcast when you cut people off? I don't care if this is your show. I will tell you where you're being rude, whether this is your show or you're on the sidewalk in a conversation with me. I'm disagreeing with your capacity in your model of reality to make any affirmations and denial that are rationally based, given your model of reality. What is it that is ultimate and identifiable that dictates what is and cannot be? Propositions, when spoken, will either be spoken with reference to the necessity of God or without.
See what I mean? I'm going to drop some examples of how these people should be spoken to.
No. Go ahead.
What are you talking about? It's not really clear.
No, you can wait.
Okay, yeah, so the structure of your argument is, well, I've given an answer, you don't believe it, that means you have to give an answer.
If you're going to ask me, do I think a thing exists, I'm going to ask you what it means.
Anybody can presuppose that a magical being is the grounding of everything, and then just say, herder, if you disagree with me, then I'll just claim my thing is the ultimate rational grounding of everything, and yours isn't, I win. Well, see, I don't like you, nobody likes you, so I'm not going to treat you with the respect that you think you deserve, because you don't deserve any. Gary, shut the fuck up.
I want to have a conversation with you instead of you just filibustering.
You are the most verbally abusive, controlling, aggressive, grumpy old fuck on the internet. So shut the hell up coming up here like I deserve respect. You don't. You don't deserve anything, Gary. So shut the fuck up.
I actually predicted to a friend.
You don't have any friends, Gary. Shut the fuck up.
So where does all of this leave us?
Fucking nowhere.
12 arguments. 12 pillars of reason, evidence, and experience.
Nope. 12 arguments, 12 overlapping batches of baseless assertions.
Each pointing to the same inescapable conclusion. God exists, not as a metaphor, not as a psychological crutch, but as the eternal, necessary, personal, and righteous creator of everything that is. The universe had a beginning. It is fine-tuned for life. It is filled with beauty, morality, logic, order, and meaning. And at the very center of history, a crucified man rose from the grave, leaving behind an empty tomb and a movement that changed the world.
So, I guess we'll agree to disagree, because, you know, you're full of shit. These are indeed arguments that have been around for a long time, as successive generations have picked them up and run with them. To stretch the metaphor, while they were running, they then fell over and sprained their ankles, and got the argument stuck right up their nose. Again, I'll stress that none of this means there is no God, but just that the arguments don't come close to proving that there is. What's more, I'd personally say that it's unlikely that any of these arguments are the actual reasons that people believe. I think it much more likely that they were formed by people trying to find a logical reason for the faith they already had. This would go some way to explain why these arguments are so ineffective for people who don't already have a belief. Why not start your own cult by investing in several kilos of Kool-Aid and the domain name definitelynotaCult.com? Spread the good word of your new gospel, made by taking the first half of Luke and the second half of John, and calling it the Gospel of Keith. And remember, most importantly, the end times are approaching rapidly. The 25th of July will bring pestilence, famine, war, and death on a scale never before seen. And for the low price of $59.99, you can get your genuine imitation simulated knitwear commemorative jumper. I survived the end times, and all I got was dismembered and eaten by the holy zombies of Jerusalem. And congratulations to Evan Sachs at Old News is Good News and at Mitt Velkez for coming joint first in the anagram competition. Racing ahead in a field of two, they've worked wonders.
See you next time.